And then, we saw the clips of Ric Flair in WrestleMania 24, the retirement match. So you retire Ric Flair, one of your influences when you were watching wrestling before you even became a wrestler. Talk a little bit about how that came about and who came to you. When did it become the decision that you were going to be the guy to do it?
Well, first of all, I guess I think about, again, that whole return, so to speak, and again, all the different WrestleMania stuff that I got to do, with Jericho and then Angle, and then I don't know, again, and I heard you out here like milking the alpha, whatever the Jericho thing, which is I liked the play on words that you did there. No, it is. I mean, it was very good, and
coming from you, that means a lot.
No, but I mean, I do. I like the way you sort of went into it. I think it's neat. But and I guess I just say that for a chance to talk about Chris. I mean, there's just the stuff that he and I got to do was, and the thing is, I enjoyed it because I know I'm off the subject, but like I can remember. So not long after I came back, they put out really quickly this Heartbreak and Triumph DVD, which was supposed to go come with the book and all that. And the thing is, I don't even know how well I knew Chris at that time, and even they had interviewed him prior, I didn't know him that well enough for him to talk about me, but I was watching him do an interview on that thing, and it was like, oh my goodness, he understands me. I didn't even know him that well, and we hadn't done our program yet or any of that kind of stuff. And I thought, and that's one of the things and why he and I's chemistry was always as good as it was, because Chris is one of the first guys, I think anyway. I mean, Hunter and them did, Kevin and them did. They were my buddies. Of course, they were going to know me. But he was the first guy that I never really knew that well that sort of got like, I get why Shawn does this stuff. There's a part of him inside here. Like when I say things like, I wrestle with my heart, not with my head, Chris goes, he gets it. And he understood that, like this was my art form, my way. I can't paint, I can't draw, I can't do anything. And so, but I can do this stuff. And so for me, all this stuff that's inside me, all these emotions, all this, that, it comes out to me through these storylines and through this wrestling. And he was one of the first guys that sort of grasped that. And as we did our storyline, my goodness, we could just sit there, because I every now and then, as you guys are now understanding, as I drift off into all these strange conversations, that's the way I got about wrestling, and that's the way I would sit and talk about storylines and and character development and stuff like that, because it needs to be more. I get it. I dislike you, you dislike me, and now we're gonna fight. I think I get that, but I'm just saying, and I'll say this. And I'm not trying to blow smoke or try to get over with you guys, but I feel like you guys have seen that for so long. You want more, you appreciate more. If you can watch all those other shows and understand all that character development or the insides and the outsides, you can certainly understand it from us. And it was time for us to start going there and start messing with that. And again, certainly when I saw how people reacted to all the real life stuff that went on in our lives, you guys, that affected even the wrestling matches. So clearly, all of that stuff needs to be on the table, and we ought to be able to start bringing that out of one another. You know what I mean? And he was, I don't know, like I said, I guess I bring it up just because he was always the guy that understood that, and I barely even met the guy. He just knew that from watching me, and that's why, he and I always had such great chemistry. But that brings me to the Ric thing, yes. And I guess I say all that because that's what it was. I mean, for Ric, he's sort of being put in a position where they want him to stop wrestling. And, for him, it's me or Hunter. It's just that simple. There's not any other two guys he wants to work with but me or Hunter. I don't think there's a part of him that trusts us probably more than anybody else, and certainly in that respect, to go out there and have his last match. He's pretty well resigned to the fact that Hunter's more than likely, maybe just by coincidence, I don't know, but going to be in a championship match at WrestleMania. So probably the only realistic option is me. So as much as I enjoy the idea of being the one picked, it's one of those things where, if you're just the sort of, you got the residue that's left over, that's me. And so, because the other guy's going to be, in a championship match. But regardless, didn't matter to me. I was still in the running because I do know, it would be me or Hunter. And look, for me, it is. He was, again, the guy that influenced everybody. As I've told people, as silly as it sounds, it was a 15-year-old boy's sort of love letter to his guy, the guy that made him want to do this stuff, and that was my way of sort of showing Rick all that he meant to me, and I think look, I do know that he didn't just mean that to me, that he meant that to millions of wrestling fans around the world. And so how do I, in the best way possible, do what I can to speak for all of us and to say, we want, this is a big deal for us. We want this to be special for you. And, clearly ending, with, because I was sorry and I do love it. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. I think everybody, out there felt it, and honestly, I did. I was asleep one night, woke up at 2:00 in the morning, and all of a sudden, that entire match just came to me, and I went out and started writing it down, and then by the end of it, I'm like, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm crying on the paper and stuff. I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, and then of course, and this is the truth. I'm looking at it and I'm reading it over and I'm thinking like, oh my goodness, you guys, the wrestling fans, they're either going to love this or they're going to boo me out of the building. You know what I mean? I'm going to be like, boo, I don't know. It's just like, it's going to be the cheesiest thing ever. And honestly, I didn't know whether I should show it to anybody, to be perfectly honest. You know what I mean? Because it's either like, you either really love that or again, I will say this, there's a lot of our audience is guys now, and I do want to say like that, I so appreciate the fact that, again, you guys have come so far. Like if I did this in 96 or 90, maybe 97, but if I did this in 96, you'd have booed me out of the stadium. So again, but it was, it's that we were, all of us out there, every man in that crowd, whether it was 25, 35, or 45, we were all, we all were and still are, wrestling fans, and Rick, meant that to us. So it resonated with everybody. But when you first write it down, you're not sure if like, am I the only one that's going to get this? And it doesn't really work as well if we're sitting in the middle of 80,000 people, and the only people sitting there whimpering are me and Rick. And you got. Sitting there on your hands like, what are those two big homos doing? They're just blubbering on each other. When's the wrestling match start? So, but thankfully, it did. And heck, I showed it to him, and of course, he was blubbering all week. But I showed it to him, and